The first time I caught her peeking through my living room window, I chalked it up to nosy neighbor syndrome. But when she tried to open my front door with a clipboard in hand, claiming she was conducting an emergency HOA inspection, that's when I knew Donna Fairview had finally lost it. My name's Nolan Fisher. I'm a 39-year-old contractor, which means I know my way around both tools and the law. I moved into this neighborhood 2 years ago for its peace and quiet. What I didn't know was that the homeowners association here was run like a suburban dictatorship, and Donna Fairview was the self-appointed queen. It started around noon on a Tuesday. I was working from home, eating lunch and listening to classic rock when my Ring camera pinged. I checked it, and there she was, Donna, wearing her usual beige slacks and a pastel cardigan, standing on my porch with her signature 3-inch binder. The woman never went anywhere without that thing. I opened the door a crack. "Can I help you, Donna?" She didn't even blink. "I'm here for a surprise inspection. Your lawn was 2 inches over regulation height last week, and I have reason to believe you're running an unapproved business from your garage." That stopped me cold. "What the hell are you talking about?" I saw power tools, sawdust. "You've been violating Article 7.3.3 of the HOA covenant, no commercial activity on premises without board approval." "It's all right here," she said, tapping the binder like it was the Declaration of Independence. I stepped outside, keeping the door halfway closed behind me. "I'm a licensed contractor. I store my tools in my own garage on my own property, and I'm not running a business from here. You don't have a warrant or any legal right to enter my house." Donna's lips tightened. "I don't need a warrant. As HOA president, I have inspection rights." "No, you don't," I said flatly. "Not without notice, and not inside my house." That's when she lunged, not violently but fast enough to try and push past me. I blocked her with my shoulder, and she stumbled back, looking offended like I'd just shoved royalty. "You just assaulted me," she shrieked. I laughed once. "You tried to enter my house without permission. Get off my porch." She stood there fuming for a second, then pulled out her phone. "Fine, I'll report this to the HOA board and begin violation proceedings. You'll be hearing from us." As she stormed off, I noticed her stopping to take pictures of my driveway, mailbox, and even my side gate. I watched from the porch, heart pounding not with fear but with fury. This wasn't about lawn height or sawdust. It was about control and Donna Fairview. She was about to find out she picked the wrong house. The day after Donna's little inspection, I did exactly what any clear-headed, thoroughly ticked-off homeowner with a contractor's attention to detail would do. I got to work documenting everything. I pulled the Ring footage and backed it up in triplicate. I printed stills, saved the audio, and even annotated a timeline of the entire encounter down to the second. I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I was preparing for war. By Friday morning, I had built a dossier that would make a prosecutor raise an eyebrow. But instead of rushing into action, I played it smart. I called in a favor from an old friend from high school, now a zoning attorney in the county. I laid out the facts, showed him the footage, and asked a single question. "Is this enough to file harassment charges?" He leaned back after watching Donna try to push past me into my house like she was checking for mold. "Hell yes," he said. "And if she sent you any notices without board authorization, that's impersonation of a public official. Throw in trespassing and attempted unlawful entry, and you've got yourself a real case." That was all I needed to hear. I headed to the local precinct that afternoon and filed a formal police report. I handed over the footage, the annotated timeline, and a notarized statement. The officer behind the desk, a tired-looking guy named Barnes, raised an eyebrow halfway through the video. "She really tried the door," he said. "Tried and failed." He nodded slowly, tapping a few keys. "You're not the first to file a complaint about her, but you're definitely the first with video. That changes things." By the time I left the station, I had a case number in hand and a detective assigned. And I wasn't done. That weekend, I attended the HOA's monthly open meeting. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew she'd be there. I'd never bothered going before they usually devolved into arguments about whose fence stain was too dark, but this time, I had a reason. The meeting was held in the local elementary school cafeteria. Folding chairs, cheap coffee, and a broken microphone that made everyone's voice sound like it was coming through a tin can. Donna was perched at the front table with her binder, flanked by two board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She didn't notice me at first. Not until I raised my hand. "Yes, Mr. Fisher," she said, her tone cautious. "I have a few concerns about recent board conduct, specifically about unauthorized inspections and false claims of regulatory authority." A few heads turned. Donna's eyes narrowed. "If you have a violation to contest, please file it through the proper forms." "Actually," I said, pulling a small folder from my jacket, "this isn't a violation dispute. This is a formal statement regarding harassment, attempted unlawful entry and impersonation of board powers. And since this meeting is public, I'm distributing copies to the community." I handed a few packets down the rows. Each one included screenshots from the ring footage, a copy of my police report, and an outline of the HOA bylaws Donna had violated. She stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "This is slander." "No," I said calmly, "it's evidence." The room went silent. One of the board members, a guy named Tony who I recognized as the neighborhood plumber, cleared his throat. "Donna, is any of this true?" She didn't answer, just clutched her binder like it might protect her. Tony turned to me. "The board didn't authorize any inspection. We've never even discussed your property." "Interesting," I said, not taking my eyes off Donna, "because she claimed board authority when she tried to enter my home." Donna finally found her voice. "I was preventing a code violation." "I'm protecting property values. That's my job." "The police didn't seem to agree," I said, holding up the case number. "And neither does my attorney." That was when she walked out, binder tucked under her arm like a shield, heels clicking hard across the tile, no apology, no explanation. Just vanished through the double doors, but the damage was done. Neighbors started murmuring, some flipping through the packets. A woman in the third row raised her hand. "Wait, she tried to do the same thing to me last year. Said my roof tiles were non-compliant and demanded to inspect my attic." Tony turned pale. "She never reported that." "She said she was the enforcement arm," the woman replied. "By Monday, I had 3 more neighbors come forward. Each of them had their own story." Donna had threatened a retired teacher over a bird feeder. Told a single mom her kid's sidewalk chalk was a graffiti risk. Tried to fine a veteran for leaving up a flag past sundown. The stories piled up, and I kept collecting them. Within a week, I compiled a comprehensive complaint and filed it with the state's HOA regulatory board. Most people didn't even know that existed, but I'd done my homework. They had the authority to review misconduct and even remove board officials for abuse of power. Meanwhile, Detective Lawrence, the officer assigned to my case, gave me a call. "You're going to want to hear this," he said. Turns out, Donna had been warned 2 years ago by the previous HOA president who stepped down shortly after for exceeding her authority. That warning had been brushed aside when she lobbied 2 new board members into place. She'd been acting solo ever since, using the image of board consensus to intimidate homeowners. But the biggest bombshell: she had been issuing fake citations and pocketing administrative fees. Dozens of residents thought they were paying real fines. Turns out the checks were made out to a P.O. box registered under her name. That elevated things from harassment to fraud. The police served a search warrant on her home the following Thursday. Most of the neighborhood watched from behind hedges and blinds as officers boxed up binders, a desktop computer, and several stacks of HOA letterhead. Donna was escorted out in handcuffs, no binder this time. Just a blank look and a silence that felt heavier than anything she'd ever shouted. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Tony stepped forward and read a prepared statement. Effective immediately, Donna Fairview has been removed from the board. We have notified the state and law enforcement will handle further proceedings. Refunds will be issued to all residents who paid unauthorized fees. We're working with a third-party mediator to review all past citations and clear any that were improperly issued." The room erupted in applause. I stayed in the back, arms crossed. I wasn't there for praise. I was there to make sure it stuck. As people filed out, a woman I'd never spoken to before tapped my shoulder. "Thank you," she said. "You stopped her before she hurt someone worse." I nodded once. She picked the wrong house. And this time, no one argued. By the time Donna's mugshot hit the county booking website, the neighborhood had already begun reshaping itself. Yards that had once been trimmed to within a quarter inch of some unwritten standard now had homemade benches, porch plants, and the occasional garden gnome. People smiled more. They lingered on sidewalks, waved during dog walks, and for the first time since I moved in, actually spoke to one another beyond stiff greetings. But while the surface was healing, I knew better than to think it was over. 3 nights after Donna's arrest, I heard a knock. Not at the front door, at the garage. I opened the side entrance to find Tony from the board standing there, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes scanning the street like he didn't want to be seen. "You got a minute?" he asked. I nodded and stepped aside. Inside, he didn't look at my tools or the blueprints on the wall. He just stood awkwardly until I handed him a stool and leaned against the workbench. "What's on your mind?" I asked. He glanced at the closed door, then exhaled through his nose. "It's worse than we thought, the board." We were just the front. Donna had been running everything behind the scenes. She wrote the meeting minutes herself, fabricated votes, and updated bylaws without approval. She even forged signatures. "Yours too," he nodded, more than once. I didn't notice until the police showed me copies during their investigation. She used old board letterhead that we stopped printing a year ago, had pages in her binder with fake dates and notarizations. The crazy part, some of the notaries didn't even exist. I leaned forward. "You're telling me she created fake officials?" "Not just that. The P.O. box she used for the fines, she opened it under a fake name, Carla Wynn, claimed it was the HOA's treasurer. There's no Carla Wynn, never was. But she still submitted annual financials to the state with that name listed. Is that enough for felony charges?" Tony nodded grimly. "The DA thinks so. They're pursuing wire fraud, forgery, and misuse of public trust. She filed HOA taxes under that name too." I sat back, letting that sink in. "You knew her longer than I did," I said. "Did she always have this kind of angle?" Tony shook his head. "She used to just nitpick. The kind who'd call the city if someone painted their shutters the wrong shade of tan. But when the last president resigned, she saw her chance. Said she wanted to bring order. Only a few of us realized too late that order meant total control." I could tell there was more. "What aren't you saying?" Tony rubbed his jaw. "Donna kept a ledger, not for the HOA, a personal one. Names, dates, complaints, some of them real, most of them made up. She'd track who objected at meetings, who ignored her suggestions. She marked people based on threat levels." "Threat levels?" He pulled out a folded sheet of paper from his coat and handed it to me. My name was third on the list. Beside it, non-compliant, recordings, potential legal action. Watch closely. There were red checkmarks next to 6 names. 3 of them were neighbors I'd spoken to after the last meeting. One had been fined for unauthorized fencing, another for excessive noise at a daytime barbecue. I looked up at him. "Did she ever act on these threats?" Tony hesitated. "That's why I came here tonight. One of the people on that list. She filed a noise complaint about his dog barking. The guy was out of town all weekend. He got home to find a citation and a letter stating he owed $95. The thing is, his mailbox had been broken into. The citation was placed inside, not by the mail carrier but by hand. She had keys," I said. "Master box keys," Tony nodded again. "That's what the cops think. They found 5 blank HOA master keys in her closet. She had been accessing community mailboxes under the pretense of monitoring HOA correspondence." I stood up, blood cold. "That's a federal crime. They're bringing in postal inspectors." "It's going to the feds." That night, I sent out a message on the neighborhood forum, nothing dramatic, just a quiet request for anyone who suspected mail tampering or had received suspicious citations to email me directly. Within 48 hours, I had 21 responses. One woman said she received 2 different fines for the same issue, both dated a week apart, both demanding payment to different addresses. A man 2 blocks over found a citation for unauthorized exterior lighting, despite having motion lights installed by a licensed electrician and inspected by the city. One family said they paid over $400 in fines over the course of a year, all mailed from different return addresses, none of which matched official HOA documentation. I compiled everything: dates, photos, scanned letters. Then I called Detective Lawrence again. "You'd better sit down when you read this," I told him. When he called back, it was with a single sentence: "We're looping in a federal postal investigator and a fraud task force." It snowballed fast after that. The Postal Service dispatched a special agent. A week after that, I stood by as a team of federal agents removed Donna's personal computer, several lockboxes, and a storage tub labeled HOA archives from her garage. Inside were hundreds of documents, some real, most forged. Letters addressed to homeowners, citations, fake receipts, and even a rubber stamp with the signature of a former board member who had moved to Arizona 2 years earlier. The agent in charge told me flatly, "This is one of the most elaborate HOA scams we've ever seen." And it wasn't just her. The investigation led straight to a former treasurer who had quietly resigned the year before. He'd helped her funnel funds through a dummy landscaping business, charging for non-existent services and splitting the deposits. He was arrested at his lake house that weekend. The state froze the HOA's accounts pending a full audit. In the vacuum left behind, a small group of residents, myself included, stepped up to form a temporary oversight committee. We drafted a proposal: dissolve the existing HOA charter and replace it with a resident-led cooperative, one with open books, term limits, and third-party audits. At the emergency town hall meeting, the vote wasn't close: 86 in favor, 3 against, 2 abstained. Donna's house went up for sale 2 months later. Her court date was set for early fall. The charges against her included mail fraud, forgery, unlawful surveillance, falsifying financial records, and impersonation of a public official, each carrying hefty penalties. As for me, I didn't run for the new board. I didn't need to. I'd already done what I came here to do, make sure no one else ever had to go through what I did. But I did install a new security system, not because I was worried about another Donna. Because now the neighborhood had seen what a clipboard and a fake title could do in the wrong hands. And I made sure they'd never forget how it ended, not with silence, with proof. The morning of Donna's arraignment, the courthouse parking lot was already half full by the time I arrived. I hadn't planned to attend initially, but the district attorney's office had called the night before and asked if I'd be willing to give a brief statement during the pre-hearing, just to establish the pattern of behavior. I agreed, not out of spite, but because I knew her actions had cracked deeper than anyone realized. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. Reporters lined the back wall, and a few familiar faces from the neighborhood filled the benches. Not a single one of them sat near the defense table. Donna entered flanked by her lawyer, noticeably thinner, her hair pulled back with military precision. No binder. No pastel outfit. Just a gray suit and a stare that avoided every eye in the room. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman with a voice like cold iron, called the hearing to order. Donna's attorney tried to delay. He claimed his client was undergoing medical evaluations and that stress had impaired her judgment. The judge wasn't having it. "We're not here to diagnose character," she said. "We're here to examine conduct." "Proceed." When it was my turn, I stood, walked to the front, and faced the judge. "You witnessed the defendant attempting to enter your home without permission?" she asked. "Yes, Your Honor. I provided video to law enforcement. She claimed to act under HOA authority." "Was she authorized?" "No." The board confirmed no inspection was scheduled, and she had no legal grounds. And after that incident, she continued to engage in fraudulent citation practices, forged documentation, and accessed private mailboxes without consent. I helped gather testimonies and evidence from other residents who had similar experiences. Donna's attorney objected, but the judge waved him off. "Mr. Fisher is providing context. Sit down." When I finished, I returned to my seat. There was no applause, no outburst. Just the weight of silence settling over the room like dust. The judge ordered Donna held over for trial on all charges, including mail fraud, criminal impersonation, and abuse of fiduciary responsibility. Her bail was denied. Outside, I found myself approached by a man in a dark blazer, holding a slim leather folder. He introduced himself as a compliance investigator from the state's Department of Consumer Services. I hadn't seen his name in any of the previous paperwork. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "Your documentation helped kick off a wider inquiry into Donna, into organized misuse of HOA power across several counties. She's not the only one, but she's the most blatant." He opened the folder briefly, revealing a list of flagged HOAs, each circled in red, with notations beside them. Some had already been dissolved. Others were under review. How many people were affected? Thousands. Some lost their homes. Others were billed into foreclosure. Donna's operation wasn't just about control. It was about siphoning money through legal gray zones that most homeowners never question. I asked him what would happen next. "We're pushing for legislation. Mandatory third-party audits, term limits, and a public oversight board with subpoena power. It'll take time, but this case is the nail in the coffin for a lot of bad actors." That night, I returned home to something I hadn't expected: an invitation. Not from a government agency or a reporter, but from my neighbors. They were hosting a backyard gathering, just a casual thing. No agenda. No speeches. Just people, food, and a few lawn chairs. I showed up a little late and found the entire mood transformed. Kids played tag under string lights. A homemade fire pit crackled quietly as someone passed around grilled corn and cold drinks. For the first time since moving in, the place felt like a neighborhood, not a divided patchwork of people hiding behind hedges. A woman approached me, a nurse named Lee who lived 2 streets over. She'd been quiet through the whole ordeal, but now her eyes were steady. "You know the weirdest part?" she said. "I didn't even realize how much stress she caused until she was gone. I used to check my mailbox like I was waiting for a bomb." "That sounds about right," I said. My son stopped drawing with chalk on the driveway. He thought it would get us fined. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Later, Tony found me near the cooler and handed me a folded sheet of paper. "What's this?" "Draft of the new charter. We're presenting it next week. No more secret votes, no more self-appointments. Every expenditure over $100 gets posted publicly, and the board can't act without documented consensus. We also added a clause barring any member from holding office more than once every 5 years. "Looks solid," I said, scanning it. "You want to sign on as one of the endorsers?" I hesitated. "I'm not looking to run the place." "You don't have to. Just lend your name. It'll go a long way." I agreed, and he tucked the paper away. As the evening wound down, I stood near the edge of the yard, watching neighbors laugh over stories that had nothing to do with violations or citations. Just life. Real life. The kind that had been missing for far too long. The next week, the charter passed unanimously. The old HOA was officially dissolved, replaced by a resident-run cooperative with a rotating council. No pay, no perks, just people volunteering to keep things civil and transparent. Donna's trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was airtight. Between the forged documents, unauthorized access to mail, and the manipulation of HOA funds, the prosecution laid out a clear narrative of obsession turned criminal. Her defense crumbled quickly, especially after a forensic accountant testified that nearly $200,000 had been diverted into personal accounts labeled as community improvement reserves. She was convicted on all counts: mail fraud, wire fraud, criminal impersonation, felony forgery, and unlawful surveillance. The judge, the same one from the arraignment, handed down a 12-year sentence. No parole eligibility for the first 6. The courtroom was quiet when the gavel fell. Donna didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just sat there, blinking slowly, as if the weight of her own actions had finally caught up. Back home, I boxed up the last of the evidence I'd collected: photos, letters, incident reports. I didn't throw them away. I labeled the box and slid it onto a shelf in the garage just in case someone ever needed to see how far things had gone. It wasn't about revenge. It was about memory. A week later, I was asked to speak at a local community forum hosted by the county's Housing Advisory Board. They wanted to hear from someone who had lived through the worst of HOA abuse and come out the other side. I kept it short. This wasn't about one woman with a clipboard, I told them. It was about a system that let her weaponize bureaucracy against people who were just trying to live their lives. If it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. You want real change? Start with transparency, then add accountability. And never assume silence means consent. The room gave a standing ovation. I didn't stay long after. I had work in the morning, and for once it was just regular work: no depositions, no filings, no emergency meetings, just a normal day in a neighborhood that had finally remembered how to breathe. A few weeks later, I passed by the old HOA bulletin board near the park entrance. The cork was bare except for a single laminated sheet, a copy of the new community charter, and a note thanking the residents for their participation. Someone had tacked a small hand-painted sign beneath it. It said simply, "We run this place together now." And for the first time since I'd moved in, I believed it.